So, the panel tried to think quite hard and was helped enormously by CDF staff who prepared background papers for us. We've come out with the following recommendations. I think we're terribly conscious that we've not been able to get into the depth we'd like, but sometimes you don't have time before you have to set a compass bearing and follow a signpost, and that's what we've done. So we've come out with the following sets of recommendations, which I'll just report very briefly and hope we can then have some reaction. The first is to government. We want to say to government how important it is to get below the broad vision, the big society vision, and to work quite precisely to try to identify and then to support those vulnerable communities who are most at risk at the moment. We believe that it's impossible to generate a vision of a big society unless it is something that is inclusive and fair and just for all. And that's not just a set of moral and political principles, it's that you cannot build a big society if some people are feeling a deep frustration and resentment at being left out or excluded. And so it's critical for the government that it finds a way of moving forward in a way that is inclusive and concerns, works on its question of fairness in detail, not just in abstract. I think the other thing that came very strongly from the panel is that there is no quick fix for this kind of work. And one of the most powerful lessons that came from the panel and all whom we consulted is that community development takes time and has to be sustained over time. This is not a project for short pilots or pathfinders and so on. Absolute minimum periods of commitment of 5 years. Some of the best work is done when people sustain projects over 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. We know that the best schools take that time to bed in. So an argument, you may have to start now, but try to sustain this over a period of time. We then made some recommendations to the community development practitioners and said many of you, many of us, because many of us have come out of that tradition, many of us believe in the value of the community development process, but we feel that at the moment we've got to find much harder-edged evidence and examples of the impacts and the outcomes of that process. We can't just argue that it's a good thing, that it involves and it empowers people. We've got to find a way of saying it has got powerful impacts and outcomes as well. And that needs some hard self-critical work to be set in motion. We believe there are lots of good examples, but there also will need to own up examples where work has not been sustained. As I look back on my own community development work in Coventry, in the neighbourhood of Hillfields, when I revisit that neighbourhood, actually I cannot see many of the signs left of the work that we did in the 1970s. Some of the buildings that we developed are still there, but I cannot pretend that I've got hard evidence of that community having been developed. I've got evidence, and David Brindle was there at the time, of individuals whose lives were touched, and they're still there. But the community, I'm not certain, has moved forward, and we need to acknowledge an investment of a massive amount did not produce the impacts and outcomes we would have liked. Why? We need to be able to look critically at that. We think it would be worth, actually, the community development field finding a way of commissioning or conducting or carrying out an independent review of what has been learned and achieved from all the experience of community and economic social development in this country and elsewhere. It seems to us an important time to take stock, so that we don't just assert beliefs, but we take stock and say, okay, this is an important moment to really review and listen. We've got some recommendations for the community development organisations, the peak organisations. We have sensed, and I'm a bit naive in this field, and a newcomer, we have sensed that there's quite a lot of competition and conflict within the community development field. There appear to have been 3 peak organisations who haven't always talked to each other, who sometimes sniped at each other. It's a bit like a kind of mild civil war. And we think that that might have been okay for a time of growth. It is not going to do the field any good now. It's an indulgence, frankly. We believe it's an indulgence. And we believe that the community development field has got to sort this out. It's got to do some work within its own movement. You wouldn't tolerate it, actually, if you were building a movement in a community. You would take seriously the need to do some work in coalition building. And someone needs to do that so that the community development field can speak, not necessarily with a single voice, but with a strong, clear voice which acknowledges difference. And I'm feeling quite impatient about that, actually. This is not the time to have energy wasted in internal sniping and point scoring. It's not even a very effective civil war. Now, we think this will require a very different kind of leadership. The leadership to build a coalition between competing voices is very skillful leadership. We don't know where that's going to come from, but we would like to assume that it's not going to be one organisation that's going to step in and do it, but some very serious work in trying to build a leadership that is going to create a coalition that can speak with a powerful voice in this field. And the final bit in this bit of the recommendation is there is enormous skill and knowledge in the field of community development. It's important to review that, to get an audit of it, to know what skill and knowledge is locked up in how many community workers are there in this country? 20,000 at least. To review and assess the skill base, but then also to think, what are the new skills we need for a very different world? And to be thinking about the gaps, and then to train people to be ready for that, not just to keep asserting, well, we've always done it this way and we know what works.